This is Tape 1, Side 2, The Advent of Divine Justice by Shoghi Effendi, continuing on page 18. In the light of this fundamental principle, it should always be borne in mind, nor can it be sufficiently emphasized, that the primary reason why the Bab and Baha'u'llah chose to appear in Persia and to make it the first repository of their revelation was because of all the peoples and nations of the civilized world, that race and nation had, as so often depicted by Abdu'l-Baha, sunk to such ignominious depths and manifested so great a perversity as to find no parallel among its contemporaries. For no more convincing proof could be adduced demonstrating the regenerating spirit animating the revelations proclaimed by the Bab and Baha'u'llah than their power to transform what can be truly regarded as one of the most backward, the most cowardly, and perverse peoples into a race of heroes, fit to effect, in turn, a similar revolution in the life of mankind. To have appeared among a race or nation which by its intrinsic worth and high attainments seemed to warrant the inestimable privilege of being the receptacle of such a revelation would, in the eyes of an unbelieving world, greatly reduce the efficacy of that message and detract from the self-sufficiency of its omnipotent power. The contrast so strikingly presented in the pages of Nabil's narrative between the heroism that immortalized the life and deeds of the Dawnbreakers and the degeneracy and cowardice of their defamers and persecutors is in itself a most impressive testimony to the truth of the message of him who had instilled such a spirit into the breasts of his disciples. Page 19. For any believer of that race to maintain that the excellence of his country and the innate nobility of its people were the fundamental reasons for its being singled out as the primary receptacle of the revelations of the Bab and Baha'u'llah would be untenable in the face of the overwhelming evidence afforded so convincingly by that narrative. To a lesser degree, this principle must of necessity apply to the country which has vindicated its right to be regarded as the cradle of the world order of Baha'u'llah. So great a function, so noble a role, can be regarded as no less inferior to the part played by those immortal souls who, through their sublime renunciation and unparalleled deeds, have been responsible for the birth of the faith itself. Let not, therefore, those who are to participate so predominantly in the birth of that world civilization, which is the direct offspring of their faith, imagine for a moment that for some mysterious purpose, or by any reason of inherent excellence or special merit, Baha'u'llah has chosen to confer upon their country and people so great and lasting a distinction. It is precisely by reason of the patent evils which, notwithstanding its other admittedly great characteristics and achievements, an excessive and binding materialism has unfortunately engendered within it that the author of their faith and the center of his covenant have singled it out to become the standard-bearer of the new world order envisioned in their writings. It is by such means as this that Baha'u'llah can best demonstrate to a heedless generation his almighty power to raise up from the very midst of a people immersed in the sea of materialism, a prey to one of the most virulent and long-standing forms of racial prejudice, and notorious for its political corruption, lawlessness, and laxity in moral standards, men and women who, as time goes by, will increasingly exemplify those essential virtues of self-renunciation, of moral rectitude, of chastity, of indiscriminating fellowship, of holy discipline, and of spiritual insight that will fit them for the preponderating share they will have in calling into being that world order and that world civilization of which their country, no less than the entire human race, stands in desperate need. Page 20. Theirs will be the duty and privilege, in their capacity first as the establishers of one of the most powerful pillars sustaining the edifice of the universal house of justice, and then as the champion builders of that new world order of which that house is to be the nucleus and forerunner, to inculcate, demonstrate, and apply those twin and so sorely needed principles of divine justice and order, principles to which the political corruption and the moral license, increasingly staining the society to which they belong, offer so sad and striking a contrast. Observations such as these, however distasteful and depressing they may be, should not in the least blind us to those virtues and qualities of high intelligence, of youthfulness, of unbounded initiative and enterprise which the nation as a whole so conspicuously displays, and which are being increasingly reflected by the community of the believers within it. Upon these virtues and qualities, no less than upon the elimination of the evils referred to, must depend to a very great extent the ability of that community to lay a firm foundation for the country's future role in ushering in the golden age of the cause of Baha'u'llah. How great, therefore, how staggering, the responsibility that must weigh upon the present generation of the American believers at this early stage in their spiritual and administrative evolution, to weed out by every means in their power those faults, habits, and tendencies which they have inherited from their own nation, and to cultivate patiently and prayerfully those distinctive qualities and characteristics that are so indispensable to their effective participation in the great redemptive work of their faith. Incapable as yet, in view of the restricted size of their community and the limited influence it now wields, of producing any marked effect upon the great mass of their countrymen, let them focus their attention, for the present, on their own selves, their own individual needs, their own personal deficiencies and weaknesses, ever mindful that every intensification of effort on their part will better equip them for the time when they will be called upon to eradicate in their turn such evil tendencies from the lives and the hearts of the entire body of their fellow citizens. Nor must they overlook the fact that the world order, whose basis they, as the advance guard of the future Baha'i generations of their countrymen, are now laboring to establish, can never be reared unless and until the generality of the people to which they belong has been already purged from the diverse ills, whether social or political, that now so severely afflict it. Surveying as a whole the most pressing needs of this community, attempting to estimate the more serious deficiencies by which it is being handicapped in the discharge of its task, and ever bearing in mind the nature of that still greater task with which it will be forced to wrestle in the future, I feel it my duty to lay special stress upon and draw the special and urgent attention of the entire body of the American believers, be they young or old, white or colored, teachers or administrators, veterans or newcomers, to what I firmly believe are the essential requirements for the success of the tasks which are now claiming their undivided attention. Great as is the importance of fashioning the outward instruments and of perfecting the administrative agencies which they can utilize for the prosecution of their dual task under the 7-year plan, vital and urgent as are the campaigns which they are initiating, the schemes and projects which they are devising, and the funds which they are raising for the efficient conduct of both the teaching and temple work, the imponderable, the spiritual factors which are bound up with the own individual and inner lives, and with which are associated their human and social relationships, are no less urgent and vital and demand constant scrutiny, continual self-examination, and heart-searching on their part, lest their value be impaired or their vital necessity be obscured or forgotten. Page 22. Of these spiritual prerequisites for success, which constitute the bedrock on which the security of all teaching plans, temple projects, and financial schemes must ultimately rest, the following stand out as preeminent and vital, which the members of the American Baha'i community will do well to ponder. Upon the extent to which these basic requirements are met, and the manner in which the American believers fulfill them in their individual lives, administrative activities, and social relationships, must depend the measure of the manifold blessings which the all-bountiful possessor can vouchsafe to them all. These requirements are none other than a high sense of moral rectitude on their social and administrative activities, absolute chastity in their individual lives, and complete freedom from prejudice in their dealings with peoples of a different race, class, creed, or color. The first is specially, though not exclusively, directed to their elected representatives, whether local, regional, or national, who in their capacity as the custodians and members of the nascent institutions of the faith of Baha'u'llah are shouldering the chief responsibility in laying an unassailable foundation for that universal house of justice which, as its title implies, is to be the exponent and guardian of that divine justice which can alone ensure the security of and establish the reign of law and order in a strangely disordered world. The second is mainly and directly concerned with the Baha'i youth, who can contribute so decisively to the virility, the purity, and the driving force of the life of the Baha'i community, and upon whom must depend the future orientation of its destiny, and the complete unfoldment of the potentialities with which God has endowed it. The third should be the immediate, the universal, and the chief concern of all and sundry members of the Baha'i community, of whatever age, rank, experience, class, or color, as all, with no exception, must face its challenging implications, and none can claim, however much he may have progressed along this line, to have completely discharged the stern responsibilities which it inculcates. Page 23. A rectitude of conduct, an abiding sense of undeviating justice, unobscured by the demoralizing influences which a corrupt-ridden political life so strikingly manifests, a chaste, pure, and holy life, unsullied and unclouded by the indecencies, the vices, the false standards which an inherently deficient moral code tolerates, perpetuates, and fosters. A fraternity freed from that cancerous growth of racial prejudice which is eating into the vitals of an already debilitated society. These are the ideals which the American believers must, from now on, individually and through concerted action, strive to promote in both their private and public lives, ideals which are the chief propelling forces that can most effectively accelerate the march of their institutions, plans, and enterprises, that can guard the honor and integrity of their faith, and subdue any obstacles that may confront it in the future. This rectitude of conduct, with its implications of justice, equity, truthfulness, honesty, fair-mindedness, reliability, and trustworthiness, must distinguish every phase of the life of the Baha'i community. Quoting, "The champions of God," Baha'u'llah himself has declared, "are in this day the lump that must leaven the peoples of the world. They must show forth such trustworthiness, such truthfulness and perseverance, such deeds and characters, that all mankind may profit by their example." End quote, end quote. "I swear by him who is the most great ocean," he again affirms. "Within the very breath of such souls as are pure and sanctified, far-reaching potentialities are hidden. So great are the potentialities that they exercise their influence upon all created things." End quote. Quote, "He is the true servant of God," he in another passage has written, "who in this day, were he to pass through cities of silver and gold, would not deign to look upon them, and whose heart would remain pure and undefiled from whatever things can be seen in this world, be they its goods or its treasures. I swear by the Son of Truth, the breath of such a man is endowed with potency and his words with attraction." End quote. Quote, "By him who shineth above the daysprings of sanctity," he still more emphatically has revealed, "if the whole earth were to be converted into silver and gold, no man who can be said to have truly ascended into the heaven of faith and certitude would deign to regard it, much less to seize and keep it. They who dwell within the tabernacle of God and are established upon the seats of everlasting glory will refuse, though they be dying of hunger, to stretch their hands and seize unlawfully the property of their neighbor, however vile and worthless he may be. The purpose of the one true God in manifesting himself is to summon all mankind to truthfulness and sincerity, to piety and trustworthiness, to resignation and submissiveness to the will of God, to forbearance and kindliness, to uprightness and wisdom. His object is to array every man with the mantle of a saintly character, and to adorn him with the ornament of holy and goodly deeds." End quote. Quote, "We have admonished all the loved ones of God," he insists, "to take heed lest the hem of our sacred vesture be smirched with the mire of unlawful deeds, or be stained with the dust of reprehensible conduct." End quote. Quote, "Cleave unto righteousness, O people of Baha," he thus exhorts them. "This verily is the commandment which this wronged one hath given unto you, and the first choice of his unrestrained will for every one of you." End quote. Quote, "A good character," he explains, "is verily the best mantle for men from God. With it he adorneth the temples of his loved ones. By my life, the light of a good character surpasseth the light of the sun and the radiance thereof." End quote. Quote, "One righteous act," he again has written, "is endowed with a potency that can so elevate the dust as to cause it to pass beyond the heaven of heavens. It can tear every bond asunder, and hath the power to restore the force that has spent itself and vanished. Be pure, O people of God, be pure. Be righteous, be righteous. Say, O people of God, that which can ensure the victory of him who is the eternal truth. His hosts and helpers on earth have been set down in the sacred books and scriptures, and are as clear and manifest as the sun. These hosts are such righteous deeds, such conduct and character, as are acceptable in his sight. Whoso ariseth in this day to aid our cause, and summoneth to his assistance the hosts of a praiseworthy character and upright conduct, the influence from such an action will most certainly be diffused throughout the whole world. End quote. Page 25. Quote, the betterment of the world, is yet another statement, can be accomplished through pure and goodly deeds, through commendable and seemly conduct. End quote. Quote, be fair to yourselves and to others, he thus counseleth them, that the evidences of justice may be revealed through your deeds among our faithful servants. Quote, equity, he also hath written, is the most fundamental among human virtues. The evaluation of all things must needs depend upon it. And again, quote, observe equity in your judgment, ye men of understanding heart. He that is unjust in his judgment is destitute of the characteristics that distinguish man's station. Quote, beautify your tongues, O people, he further admonishes them, with truthfulness, and adorn your souls with the ornament of honesty. Beware, O people, that ye deal not treacherously with anyone. Be ye the trustees of God amongst his creatures, and the emblems of his generosity amidst his people. Quote, let your eye be chaste, is yet another counsel, your hand faithful, your tongue truthful, and your heart enlightened. Quote, be an ornament to the countenance of truth, is yet another admonition, a crown to the brow of fidelity, a pillar of the temple of righteousness, a breath of life to the body of mankind, an ensign of the hosts of justice, a luminary above the horizon of virtue. Quote, let truthfulness and courtesy be your adorning, is still another admonition. Suffer not yourselves to be deprived of the robe of forbearance and justice, that the sweet savours of holiness may be wafted from your hearts upon all created things. Say, beware, O people of Baha, lest ye walk in the ways of them whose words differ from their deeds. Strive that ye may be enabled to manifest to the peoples of the earth the signs of God, and to mirror forth his commandments. Let your acts be a guide unto all mankind, for the professions of most men, be they high or low, differ from their conduct. It is through your deeds that you can distinguish yourselves from others. Through them the brightness of your light can be shed upon the whole earth. Happy is the man that heedeth my counsel, and keepeth the precepts prescribed by him who is the all-knowing, the all-wise. End quote. Quote, O army of God, writes Abdu'l-Baha, through the protection and help vouchsafed by the Blessed Beauty, may my life be a sacrifice to his loved ones. You must conduct yourselves in such a manner that ye may stand out distinguished and brilliant as the sun among other souls. Page 26. Should any one of you enter a city, he should become a center of attraction by reason of his sincerity, his faithfulness and love, his honesty and fidelity, his truthfulness and loving kindness towards all the peoples of the world, so that the people of that city may cry out and say, this man is unquestionably a Baha'i, for his manners, his behavior, his conduct, his morals, his nature and disposition reflect the attributes of the Baha'is. Not until ye attain this station can ye be said to have been faithful to the covenant and testament of God. Quote, the most vital duty in this day, he moreover has written, is to purify your characters, to correct your manners, and improve your conduct. The beloved of the merciful must show forth such character and conduct among his creatures that the fragrance of their holiness may be shed upon the whole world, and may quicken the dead, inasmuch as the purpose of the manifestation of God and the dawning of the limitless lights of the invisible is to educate the souls of men and refine the character of every living man. Truthfulness, he asserts, is the foundation of all human virtues. Without truthfulness, progress and success in all the worlds of God are impossible for any soul. When this holy attribute is established in man, all the divine qualities will also be acquired. End of quotes. Such a rectitude of conduct must manifest itself with ever-increasing potency in every verdict which the elected representatives of the Baha'i community, in whatever capacity they may find themselves, may be called upon to pronounce. It must be constantly reflected in the business dealings of all of its members, in their domestic lives, in all manner of employment, and in any service they may in the future render their government or people. It must be exemplified in the conduct of all Baha'i electors when exercising their sacred rights and functions. It must characterize the attitude of every loyal believer towards non-acceptance of political posts, non-identification with political parties, non-participation in political controversies, and non-membership in political organizations and in ecclesiastical institutions. It must reveal itself in the uncompromising adherence of all, whether young or old, to the clearly enunciated and fundamental principles laid down by Abdu'l-Baha in his addresses, and to the laws and ordinances revealed by Baha'u'llah in his most holy book. Page 27. It must be demonstrated in the impartiality of every defender of the faith against its enemies, in his fair-mindedness and in recognizing any merits that enemy may possess, and in his honesty in discharging any obligations he may have towards him. It must constitute the brightest ornament of the life, the pursuits, the exertions, and the utterances of every Baha'i teacher, whether laboring at home or abroad, whether in the front ranks of the teaching force or occupying a less active and responsible position. It must be made the hallmark of that numerically small yet intensely dynamic and highly responsible body of the elected national representatives of every Baha'i community, which constitutes the sustaining pillar and the sole instrument for the election in every community of that universal house whose very name and title, as ordained by Baha'u'llah, symbolizes that rectitude of conduct which is its highest mission to safeguard and enforce. So great and transcendental is this principle of divine justice, a principle that must be regarded as the crowning distinction of all local and national assemblies in their capacity as forerunners of the universal house of justice, that Baha'u'llah himself subordinates his personal inclination and wish to the all-compelling force of its demands and implications. Quote, God is my witness, he thus explains, were it not contrary to the law of God, I would have kissed the hand of my would-be murderer and would cause him to inherit my earthly goods. I am restrained, however, by the binding law laid down in the book, and am myself bereft of all worldly possessions. Quote, Know thou of a truth, he significantly affirms, these great oppressions that have befallen the world are preparing it for the advent of the most great justice. Quote, Say, he again asserts, He hath appeared with that justice wherewith mankind hath been adorned, and yet the people are, for the most part, asleep. Quote, The light of men is justice, he moreover states, quench it not with the contrary winds of oppression and tyranny. The purpose of justice is the appearance of unity among men. Quote, No radiance, he declares, can compare with that of justice. The organization of the world and the tranquility of mankind depend upon it. Quote, O people of God, he exclaims, that which traineth the world is justice, for it is upheld by two pillars, reward and punishment. These two pillars are the sources of the life to the world. Quote, Justice and equity, is yet another assertion, are two guardians for the protection of man. They have appeared arrayed in their mighty and sacred names to maintain the world in uprightness and protect the nations. Quote, Bestir yourselves, O people, is his emphatic warning, in anticipation of the days of divine justice, for the promised hour is now come. Beware lest ye fail to apprehend its import, and be accounted among the erring. Quote, The day is approaching, he similarly has written, when the faithful will behold the day star of justice shining in its full splendor from the day spring of glory. Quote, The shame I was made to bear, he significantly remarks, hath uncovered the glory with which the whole of creation hath been invested, and through the cruelties I have endured, the day star of justice hath manifested itself and shed its splendor upon men. Quote, The world, he again has written, is in great turmoil, and the minds of its people are in a state of utter confusion. We entreat the Almighty that He may graciously illuminate them with the glory of His justice, and enable them to discover that which will be profitable unto them at all times and under all conditions. Quote, And again, there can be no doubt whatever that if the day star of justice, which the clouds of tyranny have obscured, were to shed its light upon men, the face of the earth would be completely transformed. End of quotes. Quote, God be praised, Abdu'l-Baha in his turn exclaims, The sun of justice hath risen above the horizon of Baha'u'llah, for in his tablets the foundations of such a justice have been laid as no mind hath from the beginning of creation conceived. Quote, The canopy of existence, he further explains, resteth upon the pole of justice and not of forgiveness, and the life of mankind dependeth upon justice, and not on forgiveness." End of quote. Small wonder, therefore, that the author of the Baha'i Revelation should have chosen to associate the name and title of that house, which is to be the crowning glory of his administrative institutions, not with forgiveness, but with justice, to have made justice the only basis and permanent foundation of his most great peace, and to have proclaimed it in his hidden words as the best beloved of all things in his sight. Page 29. It is to the American believers particularly that I feel urged to direct this fervent plea to ponder in their hearts the implications of this moral rectitude, and to uphold with heart and soul and uncompromisingly, both individually and collectively, this sublime standard, a standard of which justice is so essential and potent an element. As to a chaste and holy life, it should be regarded as no less essential a factor that must contribute to its proper share to the strengthening and vitalization of the Baha'i community, upon which must, in turn, depend the success of any Baha'i plan or enterprise. In these days, when the forces of irreligion are weakening the moral fiber and undermining the foundations of individual morality, the obligation of chastity and holiness must claim an increasing share of the attention of the American believers, both in their individual capacities and as the responsible custodians of the interests of the faith of Baha'u'llah. In the discharge of such an obligation, to which the special circumstances resulting from an excessive and inveterating materialism now prevailing in their country lend particular significance, they must play a conspicuous and predominant role. All of them, be they men or women, must at this threatening hour, when the lights of religion are fading out and its restraints are one by one being abolished, pause to examine themselves, scrutinize their conduct, and with characteristic resolution arise to purge the life of their community of every trace of moral laxity that might stain the name or impair the integrity of so holy and precious a faith. A chaste and holy life must be made the controlling principle in the behavior and conduct of all Baha'is, both in their social relations with the members of their own community and in their contact with the world at large. Page 30. It must adorn and reinforce the ceaseless labors and meritorious exertions of those whose enviable position is to propagate the message and to administer the affairs of the faith of Baha'u'llah. It must be upheld in all its integrity and implications in every phase of the life of those who fill the ranks of that faith, whether in their homes, their travels, their clubs, their societies, their entertainments, their schools, and their universities. It must be accorded special consideration in the conduct of the social activities of every Baha'i summer school and any other occasions on which Baha'i community life is organized and fostered. It must be closely and continually identified with the mission of the Baha'i youth, both as an element in the life of the Baha'i community and as a factor in the future progress and orientation of the youth of their own country. Such a chaste and holy life, with its implications of modesty, purity, temperance, decency, and clean-mindedness, involves no less than the exercise of moderation in all that pertains to dress, language, amusements, and all artistic and literary avocations. It demands daily vigilance in the control of one's carnal desires and corrupt inclinations. It calls for the abandonment of a frivolous conduct with its excessive attachment to trivial and often misdirected pleasures. It requires total abstinence from all alcoholic drinks, from opium, and from similar habit-forming drugs. It condemns the prostitution of art and of literature, the practices of nudism and of companionate marriage, infidelity in marital relationships, and all manner of promiscuity, of easy familiarity, and of sexual vices. It can tolerate no compromise with the theories, the standards, the habits, and the excesses of a decadent age. Nay, rather it seeks to demonstrate, through the dynamic force of its example, the pernicious character of such theories, the falsity of such standards, the hollowness of such claims, the perversity of such habits, and the sacrilegious character of such excesses. Quoting, "By the righteousness of God," writes Baha'u'llah, "the world, its vanities, and its glory, and whatever delights it can offer, are all in the sight of God as worthless as, nay, even more contemptible than dust and ashes. Would that the hearts of men could comprehend it. Wash yourselves thoroughly, O people of Baha, from the defilement of the world, and of all that pertaineth unto it." Page 31. "God himself beareth me witness, the things of the earth ill beseemeth you. cast them away unto such as may desire them, and fasten your eyes upon this holy and effulgent vision." End quote. Quote, "O ye, my loved ones," he thus exhorts his followers, "suffer not the hem of my sacred vesture to be besmirched and mired with the things of this world, and follow not the promptings of your evil and corrupt desires." End quote. And again, quote, "O ye, the beloved of the one true God, pass ye beyond the narrow retreats of your evil and corrupt desires, and advance into the vast immensity of the realm of God, and abide ye in the meads of sanctity and of detachment, that the fragrance of your deeds may lead the whole of mankind to the ocean of God's unfading glory." End quote. "Disencumber yourselves," he thus commands them, "of all attachment to this world and the vanities thereof. Beware that ye approach them not, inasmuch as they prompt you to walk after your own lusts and covetous desires, and hinder you from entering the straight and glorious path." End quote. Quote, "Eschew all manner of wickedness," is his commandment, "for such things as are forbidden unto you in the book, which none touch except such as God hath cleansed from every taint of guilt, and numbered among the purified." End quote. Quote, "A race of men," is his written promise, "incomparable in character, shall be raised up, which with the feet of detachment will tread under all who are on earth and in heaven, and will cast the sleeve of holiness over all that hath been created from water and clay." End quote. Quote, "The civilization," is his grave warning, "so often vaunted by the learned exponents of arts and sciences, will, if allowed to overleap the bounds of moderation, bring great evil upon men. If carried to excess, civilization will prove as prolific a source of evil as it has been of goodness when kept within the restraints of moderation." End quote. Quote, "He hath chosen out of the whole world the hearts of his servants," he explains, "and made them each a seat for the revelation of his glory. Wherefore sanctify them from every defilement, that the things for which they were created may be engraven upon them. This indeed is a token of God's bountiful favor." Page 32. End quote. Quote, "Say," he proclaims, "he is not to be numbered with the people of Baha, who followeth his mundane desires, or fixeth his heart on the things of the earth. He is my true follower, who, if he come to a valley of pure gold, will pass straight through it, aloof as a cloud, and will neither turn back nor pause. Such a man is assuredly of me. From his garment the concourse of high can inhale the fragrance of sanctity, and if he meet the fairest and most comely of women, he would not feel his heart seduced by the least shadow of desire for her beauty. Such an one, indeed, is the creation of spotless chastity. Thus instructeth you the pen of the Ancient of Days, as bidden by your Lord, the Almighty, the All-Bountiful." End quote. Quote, "They that follow their lusts and corrupted inclinations," is yet another warning, "have erred and dissipated their efforts. They indeed are of the lost." End quote. Quote, "It behoveth the people of Baha," he also has written, "to die to the world and all that is therein, to be so detached from all earthly things that the inmates of paradise may inhale from their garment the sweet-smelling savor of sanctity. They that have tarnished the fair name of the cause of God by following the things of the flesh, these are in palpable error." End quote. Quote, "Purity and chastity," he particularly admonishes, "have been and still are the most great ornaments for the handmaidens of God. God is my witness, the brightness of the light of chastity sheddeth its illumination upon the worlds of the Spirit, and its fragrance is wafted even unto the most exalted paradise." Quote, "God," he again affirms, "hath verily made chastity to be a crown for the heads of his handmaidens. Great is the blessedness of that handmaiden that hath attained unto this great station." Quote, "We verily have decreed in our book," is his assurance, "a goodly and bountiful reward to whosoever will turn away from wickedness and lead a chaste and godly life. He in truth is the great giver, the all-bountiful." Quote, "We have sustained the weight of all calamities," he testifieth, "to sanctify you from all earthly corruption, and ye are yet indifferent. We verily behold your actions. If we perceive from them the sweet-smelling savor of purity and holiness, we will most certainly bless you. Then will the tongues of the inmates of paradise utter your praise and magnify your names amidst them who have drawn nigh unto God." Page 33. Quote, "The drinking of wine," writes Abdu'l-Baha, "is, according to the text of the most holy book, forbidden, for it is the cause of chronic diseases, weakeneth the nerves, and consumeth the mind." Quote, "Drink ye, O handmaidens of God," Baha'u'llah himself has affirmed, "the mystic wine from the cup of my words. Cast away then from you that which your minds abhor, for it hath been forbidden unto you in his tablet and his scriptures. Beware lest ye barter away the river that is life indeed for that which the souls of the pure-hearted detest. Become ye intoxicated with the wine of the love of God, and not with that which deadeneth your minds, O ye that adore him. Verily it hath been forbidden unto every believer, whether man or woman. Thus hath the sun of my commandment shone forth above the horizon of my utterance, that the handmaidens who believe in me may be illumined. End of quotes. It must be remembered, however, that the maintenance of such a high standard of moral conduct is not to be associated or confused with any form of asceticism or excessive and bigoted Puritanism. The standard inculcated by Baha'u'llah seeks under no circumstances to deny anyone the legitimate right and privilege to derive the fullest advantage and benefit from the manifold joys, beauties, and pleasures with which the world has been so plentifully enriched by an all-loving Creator. Quote, should a man, Baha'u'llah himself reassures us, wish to adorn himself with the ornaments of the earth, to wear its apparels, or partake of the benefits it can bestow, no harm can befall him, if he alloweth nothing whatsoever to intervene between him and God. For God hath ordained every good thing, whether created in the heavens or in the earth, for such of his servants as truly believe in him. Eat ye, O people, of the good things which God hath allowed you, and deprive not yourselves from his wondrous bounties. Render thanks and praise unto him, and be of them that are truly thankful. End quote. As to racial prejudice, the corrosion of which for well nigh a century has bitten into the fiber and attacked the whole social structure of American society, it should be regarded as constituting the most vital and challenging issue confronting the Baha'i community at the present stage of its evolution. Page 34. The ceaseless exertions which this issue of paramount importance calls for, the sacrifices it must impose, the care and vigilance it demands, the moral courage and fortitude it requires, the tact and sympathy it necessitates, invest this problem, which the American believers are still far from having satisfactorily resolved, with an urgency and importance that cannot be overestimated. White and Negro, high and low, young and old, whether newly converted to the faith or not, all who stand identified with it must participate in and lend their assistance, each according to his or her capacity, experience, and opportunities, to the common task of fulfilling the instructions, realizing the hopes, and following the example of Abdu'l-Baha. Whether colored or non-colored, neither race has the right or can conscientiously claim to be regarded as absolved from such an obligation as having realized such hopes or having faithfully followed such an example. A long and thorny road, beset with pitfalls, still remains untraveled, both by the white and the Negro exponents of the redeeming faith of Baha'u'llah. On the distance they cover and the manner in which they travel that road must depend, to an extent which few among them can imagine, the operation of those intangible influences which are indispensable to the spiritual triumph of the American believers and the material success of their newly launched enterprise. Let them call to mind fearlessly and determinedly the example and conduct of Abdu'l-Baha while in their midst. Let them remember his courage, his genuine love, his informal and indiscriminating fellowship, his contempt for and impatience of criticism, tempered by his tact and wisdom. Let them revive and perpetuate the memory of those unforgettable and historic episodes and occasions on which he so strikingly demonstrated his keen sense of justice, his spontaneous sympathy for the downtrodden, his ever-abiding sense of the oneness of the human race, his overflowing love for its members, and his displeasure with those who dared to flout his wishes, to deride his methods, to challenge his principles, or to nullify his acts. Page 35. To discriminate against any race on the ground of its being socially backward, politically immature, and numerically in a minority is a flagrant violation of the spirit that animates the faith of Baha'u'llah. The consciousness of any division or cleavage in its ranks is alien to its very purpose, principles, and ideals. Once its members have fully recognized the claim of its author, and by identifying themselves with its administrative order, accepted unreservedly the principles and laws embodied in its teachings, every differentiation of class, creed, or color must automatically be obliterated and never be allowed under any pretext, and however great the pressure of events or of public opinion, to reassert itself. If any discrimination is at all to be tolerated, it should be a discrimination not against, but rather in favor of the minority, be it racial or otherwise. Unlike the nations and peoples of the earth, be they of the West or of the East, democratic or authoritarian, communist or capitalist, whether belonging to the old world or the new, who either ignore, trample upon, or extirpate the racial, religious, or political minorities within the sphere of their jurisdiction, every organized community enlisted under the banner of Baha'u'llah should feel it to be its first and inescapable obligation to nurture, encourage, and safeguard every minority belonging to any faith, race, class, or nation within it. So great and vital is this principle that in such circumstances as when an equal number of ballots have been cast in an election, or where the qualifications for any office are balanced as between the various races, faiths, or nationalities within the community, priority should unhesitatingly be accorded the party representing the minority, and this for no other reason except to stimulate and encourage it, and afford it an opportunity to further the interests of the community. In the light of this principle, and bearing in mind the extreme desirability of having the minority elements participate and share responsibility in the conduct of Baha'i activity, it should be the duty of every Baha'i community so to arrange its affairs that in cases where individuals belonging to the diverse minority elements within it are already qualified and fulfill the necessary requirements, Baha'i representative institutions, be they assemblies, conventions, conferences, or committees, may have represented on them as many of these diverse elements, racial or otherwise, as possible. Page 36. The adoption of such a course and faithful adherence to it would not only be a source of inspiration and encouragement to those elements that are numerically small and inadequately represented, but would demonstrate to the world at large the universality and representative character of the faith of Baha'u'llah and the freedom of his followers from the taint of those prejudices which have already wrought such havoc in the domestic affairs as well as the foreign relationships of the nations. This is the end of Side 2 of Tape 1, ending on page 36. Please go to Tape 2 for a continuation.